What if the person you matched with never existed? What if they were waiting, not to meet you, but to make you disappear from your life the way you disappeared from their picture? You swipe, you match, you chat. Dating apps are woven into how people meet now. Coffee, cocktails, the odd midnight message that turns into something real. But for some, a swipe becomes a slideshow of lies that slides into real danger. These are 4 true catfish horror stories, real people, real fear, where deception online bled into the street outside, the knock on the door, the photo left under the dumpster. Before we dive in, these are first-person accounts. Names, platforms, the exact sequence of events are preserved as closely as possible. If a detail was unclear, I'll flag it. And if this hits close to home, stay with me to the end. There are 2 short safety reminders and a way to share your own story. If you want more verified true stories like these, hit like and subscribe. Story 1. Bumble, a dinner that never happened, and a stranger who watched him leave. I matched Rachel on Bumble. Her profile felt ordinary. Coffee photos, a lit-up skyline, a caption about loving bad puns and Thai food. We messaged for a few days. Chill banter. She suggested dinner. She picked the restaurant, an easy place near the river, the kind with Edison bulbs and a menu that wasn't trying too hard. He liked that. He liked her. She said she'd be there at 7. He arrived early and took a table by the window. He ordered water. Time became a thin thread. Minutes passing, people coming and going. Her absence first felt like a small disappointment. Then, an hour later, a man in a black hoodie walked up to his table. He said he was Rachel's brother, the narrator told me. He said her phone died and she fainted. He wanted me to come to their place. He said she needed a friend. The man smelled of street smoke. He had a way of smiling that didn't reach his eyes. He moved a little too close. He looked over once, twice, then reached out as if to check an empty seat. The narrator said no. The man told him it would only be quick. He stepped so he was between the narrator and the exit. For a breath, the restaurant felt smaller. I told him I didn't want to go. He kind of put his hand on my shoulder. He said, "You should have come with me." The narrator said, repeating the line the stranger used. He left. He walked to his car. He felt watched the whole walk back. That night, the messages started. Login attempts, text from unknown numbers calling him by his legal name, a knock at his door at 2 a.m. He looked through the peephole and saw nothing. In the morning, a photo in a plastic bag, a shot taken from outside the restaurant, the table empty, the narrator's jacket still folded on the chair. Someone had scrawled "you" on the back.
The red flags were small at first. She picked the place and then she couldn't make it. The sudden explanation about a dead phone. The insistence that he come somewhere else. Each on its own could be an ordinary excuse. Stacked, they became a strategy. He scrubbed his apps, he changed passwords, he changed numbers. He moved a few apps to a hidden folder and told fewer people than he should have. He still flinches when someone knocks. He never learned who the man in the hoodie was. The only certain thing was that his decision to leave the restaurant, his gut tightening as the man moved to block him, probably saved him from whatever else might have happened that night. The identity of the man remains unclear. One-line takeaway? A last-minute change of plan? A dead phone? Someone insisting you go somewhere else? Those small excuses can be the beginning of a trap. If this story is striking a nerve and you want more verified true stories like this one, hit like and subscribe. Story 2. Hinge, a Friday night at an arcade bar, and the way a date's car trouble turned into a run for his life. He matched Rebecca on Hinge. Her profile read like a real person. College photos, a picture with a dog, a joke about loving bad movies. They planned a Friday night, a bar near town that had retro arcade machines in the back. He liked that because it felt safe. People around, lights, the clink of tokens. The day of the date, she texted that her car had broken down. "Can you come around back?" she asked. The idea of meeting at the service entrance felt off at first, but she sounded apologetic, embarrassed. He went around back, just to be polite, he told himself, and there were fewer witnesses, dimmer lights, a side door to the alley. As he moved to exit after deciding he'd had enough and would meet her another time, 2 men in masks came running from behind the bar. They dove past the exit like a flash. He didn't stop. He put his foot on the gas and drove. Later, he would see a dent on his trunk, a large, angry crease that hadn't been there before. He called the police. They took a report but told him there wasn't much actionable evidence. No faces, no names, a dent, and a shaken man. He was told what he already knew. Be careful, be cautious. He told me he couldn't shake the feeling that Rebecca's last-minute excuse, the car trouble and the change of meeting spot, had been used as bait. His instinct to leave saved him from finding out what the masked men intended. He tightened his routines after that. He started calling or FaceTiming people before meeting. He began doing small checks, confirm a name, scan for mutual friends, ask for a quick video call. He didn't abandon the apps, he just approached them differently, more guarded, more suspicious. One-line takeaway? Last-minute location changes and insistence on secluded meeting spots are a common lure. Trust the discomfort those details bring.
But that was only the beginning. Next, a long, suffocating lie that stretched for months, ending in something even uglier. Story 3. Michael, a long con that leans on charm, broken camera excuses, and a friendship that mutated into stalking. He was a college student when he met Michael. The platform wasn't one we can confirm. He moved between apps and DMs, but the pattern was familiar. Michael was present. He called often. When his camera broke, he explained it with believable stories: bad lighting, a problem with his phone, a grandmother's old laptop. He sent pictures, good pictures, but he never did video. He pressured the narrator, gently at first, for photos that were more intimate. He teetered between charm and insistence. When the narrator pulled back, saying he wasn't comfortable, Michael would pivot to guilt. I just want to feel close. He was careful. He stayed just on the right side of pushy. Months of late-night calls and small confessions layered into a relationship that wasn't. Michael had a narrative for everything. He worked odd hours. He'd been hurt before. He loved the same bands. He was tender at times. At other times, he was an anchor, pulling the narrator back when he tried to pull away. When the narrator insisted on meeting in person for Christmas, Michael agreed, suddenly, decisively. Then he called and changed the tone. In the middle of the call, he said something impossible. He admitted the photos he'd sent weren't his. He told the narrator the pictures were stolen. The man had been living inside a borrowed face for months. Then Michael sent a new photo. This one, he said, was real. The narrator looked at it and felt a sickening slide, a private collapse, a real person or someone else borrowing reality. The confession didn't come with the relief the narrator expected. It came with a new, sharper fear. He tried to end it. He told Michael he couldn't do it anymore. Michael reacted like someone whose personal logic didn't match the narrator's reality. He became persistent. He watched the narrator's social feeds. He commented on old photos in a way that suggested he had been watching for a long time. He said things that were too specific about places the narrator had only mentioned once. He started to send images that were too current. Pictures of a tree outside the narrator's building, a recent snapshot of the street sign by his cousin's apartment. Those photos arrived without explanation. The narrator told family. He called the police and was told they would come if there was an immediate threat, if there was a knock, if someone appeared at the door. For months, the threat was a patient, networked pressure across apps. There's a moment people get wrong about catfishing like this. It doesn't always end with a dramatic reveal. Sometimes it creeps toward the real world in slow increments. Comments here, a photo there. One detail that narrows the distance between screens and sidewalk.
For him, it was when Michael sent a recent photo of the front of his house. That picture had a mail flag up, the reflection of a car at the curb. He recognized the angle, he recognized the light. The narrator froze. The story doesn't stop there. There was an arrest later, and officers found a knife. But the part I want to leave you with now is the before, the suffocating stretch of being watched by someone who had lived in your head long enough to know the cadence of your life. That knowledge felt worse than any single violent image. It was intimate and theft at once. One-line takeaway. Long-term catfishers often cultivate trust to collect information. When they cross into the physical world, what they already know can be used to intimidate. He told me the arrest happened after the moment things tipped into the real world, but the lead-up was an education in how vulnerability is weaponized. A broken camera, excuses that earned patience, and a gradual tightening of control that left him feeling exposed in his own home. You can imagine where the story goes from here, but there's a detail I have to leave as a shadow for now. Who Michael really was, and how he found the exact angle of that street to photograph, remains unclear in full. Some questions were answered by police reports later. Others were left with a thin, unsatisfying line where identity should be. For now, what matters is the method. Intimacy online used as a foothold for real-world intrusion. He changed locks. He moved rooms in his house when he could.
He slept with the lights on for months. Trauma isn't only the dramatic headline, it's the small, persistent waking up at 3 a.m. and counting footsteps in the hallway that aren't there. A brief bridge before the next one. Not all catfish wear stolen faces online. The next story shows an impersonation executed in person, a lie performed where witnesses could have stopped it, and how a note left on a doorstep can keep someone moving for months. Story 4 begins with a match on Hinge that moved to Instagram, a follow list dense with men, a feed curated in a way that should have set off alarms. But before we get to the bar, there's a detail to unpack. Why would someone with a public profile and hundreds of male commenters avoid showing their real circle of friends? Why would a person whose comments are dominated by the same few accounts present as someone whose life is full and approachable? The narrator thought the account looked odd. No mutual female friends, repetitive comments, and a handful of male followers who showed up on every post with identical lines. He asked for a FaceTime. "Camera's acting up," she said. He asked for a small verification. "Send a selfie with today's paper," a chuckle-worthy request in 2024. She laughed, sent a long message about privacy and how she disliked the superficiality of live video. That should have been enough for him to walk away.
Instead, he shrugged it off because of how easy the early messages were. The quick jokes, the late-night confessions that felt honest. They agreed to meet at a popular bar downtown. He arrived early and waited, noticing the crowd, scanning faces. That's when Rob arrived. Rob was talkative, too friendly, and a little too quick to place himself next to the narrator. He smelled faintly of cologne and cheap whiskey. He laughed a lot. He told stories about nights out. Later, when the narrator tried to recall exactly how Rob slid into the conversation, the memory fuzzed like a song that ends too abruptly. Rob touched his arm while telling a joke. He seemed to know things about Jenna, little details the narrator had expected only someone who was Jenna would know. When Rob leaned in and whispered something in his ear, those words sank in like a cold blade. "I'm Jenna." It's one thing to be catfished from behind a screen. It's another to have the lie walk up to you and press your wrist in their hand. The narrator was stunned. He pulled away. Rob smiled like it was a joke. The bar noise swallowed the scene. A few minutes later, he left, palms clammy. That night, someone banged on his window. Then at dawn, he found a note taped to his front door. "I'll be watching you." The ink had bled along the fiber of the paper, deliberate, real. The narrator moved out within days. He blocked accounts, changed routes, avoided places he used to love. The impersonation had ceased, yet the presence did not. The note felt like a punctuation mark someone had left at the end of a sentence that refused to complete. One-line takeaway. An impersonator can show up in person. The gesture of physical contact, touching your arm, calling himself by the fake name, can be more disorienting than any lie typed on a screen. At this point, we've moved through matches and messages, through hoodie silhouettes, masked men in alleyways, months of deception, and a note that never quite goes away. If you've been counting, you'll notice a string that ties them together, little things that feel wrong, pushed into the background until they are the only things left. A dead phone, a sudden location change, a refusal to show a face, an insistence that you accept explanations instead of evidence. Before I continue, a short pause in the story to mention what to do if you find yourself in a similar situation. Contact local authorities if you are in immediate danger. Document messages and take screenshots to a secure place. Tell someone you trust where you are and what you're doing. These are not guarantees of safety. Police responses vary, but they create a record and create witnesses, and that matters. We're now at the point where the stories were beginning to converge, the online persona spilling into the physical world, the victims dealing not only with the shock of deception, but with the real cost of being watched, followed, and threatened.
Each narrator made an instinctive choice: leave the table, drive away, change the locks, call for help. Those choices mattered, but so did something else: the thin, corrosive patience of the people who sat behind screens and insisted they knew better, who used charm to earn proximity. And yet, there are gaps, small but important ones. The man in the hoodie's identity was never discovered. The two masked men's relationship to Rebecca is uncertain. The full origins of Michael's photos and how he obtained up-to-the-minute shots of a private home were only partially explained by later police statements. Some threads remain loose. Now, for what comes next. One of these accounts escalated to an arrest with a weapon involved. One ended with a dent on a car trunk and no faces, and another left a note that made a man leave the city where he'd grown up. The next section will go deeper into the aftermath, how police handled these cases, the small ways victims found support, and the slow work of rebuilding trust after being carved open by someone who had everything to gain from your belief. But before we go there, remember the red flags these 4 stories present in plain terms. requests to change meeting locations last minute, refusal to show live video, pressure for intimate photos, and any behavior that makes your gut tighten. These are not moral failings, they are signals. When signals pile up, they become a pattern, and patterns can be dangerous. We'll pick this up with a closer look at the police responses, the practical steps each narrator took to protect themselves, and the longer shadows that remained even after arrests and deleted accounts. For now, keep in mind how quickly a profile can become an obsession, and how quickly an obsession can cross a sidewalk and stand at your door. What the police could do, and what they couldn't, became part of each story's aftershock. Across these 4 accounts, a pattern repeats. Victims did the sensible, frightening work of creating a paper trail, screenshots, saved texts, timestamps, and then put that material on a desk where someone else would decide whether it was enough. Sometimes it was enough to trigger action. Sometimes it created only a file and a polite procedural meeting. The ways law enforcement describe the limits of their options are small moments that keep coming back to the narrators. In the first case, after the photo in the plastic bag and the knock at 2 in the morning, he called the police. They took his statement. They walked the street and said they'd review any nearby camera footage if it existed. They told me there wasn't much they could do without a name or a clear video, he remembered. The bagged photograph and the login attempts were placed into a report that sat on a server somewhere. The man in the hoodie's identity remained unclear.
The narrator kept the photo. It became something he showed to therapists and friends when the memory returned sharp. In the second story, the dented trunk and the masked men left a more physical trace, but the facts were frustratingly thin. A dent, a frightened man, no clear faces. They took my report, he said. The officers were professional, but they said without footage or witnesses who could identify someone, there's only so much they could pursue. They documented the interaction with Rebecca as an element of the report. They logged the dent, they checked the bar's cameras if the bar had them. The result was a record and a long, cold pause. Months later, the dent still marked the car, and the memory of masked figures bursting into the alley sat like a bruise under his ribs when he thought of bars and crowded rooms. The third case is the one that moved further into the physical world in a way that forced an immediate response. When the narrator said the man arrived at his house, pounded and refused to leave, his family called the police. Officers arrived, lights flashing, and the situation escalated to an arrest. According to the narrator's account, responding officers found a weapon, a knife, on the suspect. That knife changed the immediate calculus. It turned a social media stalking case into a criminal incident requiring custody and charges. Those were the terms the officers used at the scene. The narrator described the sound of handcuffs and the blur of uniform lights and the cold relief that came with watching someone who had been at his door get led away. Relief, however, did not equal erasure. In the fourth story, the note taped to the door, "I'll be watching you," became material evidence. He photographed it, handed it to police, and moved out within days. Whether the impersonator seen in the bar and the person who left the note were the same person was unclear to him. Police placed the note in evidence and filed a report. Their interest was real, but their ability to pursue was shaped by the thinness of physical leads beyond the note itself. Across all 4 cases, the refrain is the same in different words. File a report, document everything, and know that police can only act on the evidence that exists. That reality isn't an indictment or a dismissal, it's a procedural fact. For victims, it means that the most important thing they can do in the aftermath is preserve what they can preserve: texts, images, timestamps, any physical notes, so that if escalation continues, there will be artifacts to show. Still, the narrators made clear that even with reports filed, the work of recovery is private and ongoing. The private aftermath, small rituals that signal you are trying to reclaim ordinary life. After police left, life didn't return to normal. For each narrator, the routine of days shifted into a series of micro-defenses. Locks changed, routes altered, apps deleted or hidden, digital lives compartmentalized. Those acts are practical, of course, but they are also ritualistic. They are a way to stitch the edges of life back together when the fabric has been cut. The Bumble victim talks about flinching at knocks. He sleeps with his phone unplugged on the kitchen table, charging in the light, so the device cannot be used to geolocate him as he sleeps. You learn to notice the sound of a footstep outside your door, he told me. You learn to check what time a message came through. You don't show your real address in photos accidentally. He avoids restaurants with side doors. He deleted apps and kept them deleted for months. Social outings became rehearsed. Text a friend the address, share a live location. He did that not because he had an exact fear of who the man in the hoodie was, but because hypervigilance is a reasonable response to being watched. The Hinge narrator, the one with the dented trunk, changed how he dates publicly.
He still used apps because he wanted to keep living, but he shifted his rules. Video calls before meeting, public spots near families or friends, and letting a friend know where he sits. He also described how his sense of ease in crowds dimmed. Arcade lights and clinking tokens now could trigger a memory of masked men flying across the room. The dent in his trunk was a daily reminder of how quickly a night out can tilt dangerous. The college student who'd been stalked by Michael carried a different weight. The arrest removed an immediate physical threat, but the feeling of being known, of someone having mapped his life, remained. He described lying awake and replaying phrases from their conversations, trying to decode what had been truth and what had been theft. He changed locks. He adjusted his online privacy settings. He engaged family. He sought out counseling. He described therapy as a place where the small daily panics, doorbell rings, the sound of someone walking down the hall, could be unspooled and understood without shame. The bar impersonation left its own residue. The narrator moved towns. He wrote, months later, that moving felt like admitting defeat and like survival at once. It was like leaving part of my life behind so I could breathe, he said. He avoided his old coffee shop. He checked his windows differently. He made the decision to live elsewhere as both a practical and psychological step. He was trying to build a life in which the note taped to his door would no longer be legible to him. None of these actions erase the fear, but they reflect a necessary human response. People adapt. They reclaim corners of their life in small ways, sharing passwords with parents, sleeping with the lights on, carrying a heavier keychain. Those responses are messy and personal, and they deserve to be respected, not judged. The digital trail, what evidence looked like, and why it matters. A common thread is how digital behavior created traceable patterns that, once preserved, became essential.
In the aftermath, each narrator learned basic forensics by necessity, screenshot everything, backup messages, note times and dates. They saved the offending images and forwarded them to the police. They kept paper copies of threatening notes. The college student who received the picture of his house could point to metadata and recent details in the image, small things he never expected would matter, like a mail flag up or a car reflection at a certain angle. Those things, he said, are what made the threat real. But digital evidence is often incomplete. Photos can be stolen and reused, messages can be sent from burner numbers, profiles can vanish overnight. That instability creates a psychological effect as much as an evidentiary one. You may have proof of being targeted, but you rarely have a full story of the person behind it. That gap leaves victims in a place of partial closure. Arrests, when they happen, can close a chapter without closing the book. Unknowns, those indefinito markers, stay with people as a low static. When an arrest does happen, as in the case of the man who arrived at the house with a knife, it can shift the tone of the aftermath. Arrest is a relief that comes bundled with a new set of anxieties, court dates, possible testimony, the slow rotation of legal processes. For the narrator, the arrest didn't cure the insomnia, it simply made the nights less immediate, less frantic. He still woke at odd hours, but now with the knowledge that officers had intervened and taken someone away, so the threat felt contained, at least for a time. The social and relational ripples. One of the quieter damages is how these events tilt relationships. Friends respond in the instinctive ways they can. One narrator described his sister calling daily until he answered, holding the phone up and listening to the sound of his apartment. Another said his parents insisted he move in with them for a while. Those gestures are practical help and emotional scaffolding, but they also change how independence and safety feel. Losing a degree of privacy, living with parents again, moving cities, changing jobs to avoid being recognized, becomes a trade-off people accept to feel safer. Romantic trust takes a hit too. Passing from one of the narrators, when someone tells you they're charming, it suddenly feels like a risk elsewhere where it used to feel like a gift. The intimacy that made apps attractive becomes for a time suspect. That suspicion is protective and can create loneliness. The narrators describe the difficulty of separating the perpetrator's manipulation from their own capacity to connect. Therapy and supportive friends, they said, help them rebuild a sense of normalcy, slowly and unevenly. There's also shame, common and undeserved. Each victim described a moment where they felt they should have known better, where panic and embarrassment made them tell fewer people. It's important to say this plainly. Shame is not the victim's burden to carry.
These are manipulative, deliberate actions by people who stole identity or weaponized proximity. The fault lies with them. The narrator's reluctance to share widely at first is a cultural thing. People fear being judged. But those reluctant stories often become the most important ones to tell later because they help others recognize similar patterns early. What these stories teach us about red flags and what to do without panicking. If you listen to each narrative closely, patterns emerge. Not every red flag is damning on its own, but patterns are meaningful. The ones that recur across these accounts: sudden requests to change meeting locations, repeated refusal to do live video, urgent pressure for intimate photos, private conversations that avoid verifiable details, and behavior that seeks to isolate or move the meeting place away from witnesses. Another common technique is small, plausible excuses that accumulate: an empty chair, a dead phone, a fabricated emergency. Deception works by being boring. That's the terrifying part. It is ordinary until it isn't. What the narrators did that mattered was not magic. They trusted small instincts at key moments. He left the table when the man stepped between him and the exit. He floored the gas when the masked men ran. The student called family when a stranger appeared at his door. Instincts are imperfect, but they are important. If you feel genuinely unsafe, leave, discreetly if you can, and seek company. If you accept a meeting, bring someone. Let someone know where you are. Consider a short video call beforehand. These are practical steps, not guarantees. 2 brief, non-prescriptive safety takeaways that emerged from the cases. Keep evidence. Screenshots, message backups, photos of notes or damage, all of those matter. They create a record that can be essential if things escalate. Create witnesses. Share your plans with someone you trust. Send a live location when you go to meet someone new. If anything changes, last-minute location swaps, requests to meet in secluded places, call it out, and if you're uncomfortable, leave. These are suggestions born from how people actually protected themselves after the fact. They are not foolproof, and they are not instructions for confronting anyone. They are about lowering risk when a situation feels wrong. Care and community, where victims found support. People found help in different places. Family was immediate and practical for some. Friends provided getaways and temporary housing for others. Professionals, counselors, victim advocates in police departments, campus security officers offered frameworks for recovery and sometimes accompaniment during reporting. One narrator described a victim advocate who sat with him in the precinct, explained options, and helped him start a protective plan. Another told me that a neighbor's willingness to collect packages and notice strange cars in the street became a small but critical safety net.
Those networks matter. You do not have to shoulder the aftermath alone. Even when police cannot immediately intervene, community witnesses and professional advocates can help you create deterrence and a record. Seek out a trusted friend or relative. Find a local victim services line. Consider counseling if panic or sleep loss persists. The cost of silence is social isolation. The cost of speaking can be procedural and emotional, but it also produces support. A sober look at how easy it is to build a lie and why that matters. Technology makes it simple to assemble convincing personalities out of curated photos, believable messages, and patient persistence. Stolen images can be relabeled, mirrored, and repurposed. A person behind a screen can create a character that's easy to like. That ease is part of why catfishing is more than an annoyance. When an account is designed to manipulate, it plays the long game. It earns trust, and then, if it chooses, it leverages that trust into proximity. This is why the narrators kept returning to small decisions they made that changed outcomes, not accepting the single excuse, noticing the recurring pattern, acknowledging a gut feeling. Those are the moments where control returns to the potential victim. None of them are foolproof. They are sane responses to manipulative behavior. Closing the circle. What stayed and what we can hold on to. These 4 stories end in different places. A dented car, a plastic-bagged photograph, an arrest with a weapon involved, a note taped to a door that made a man leave the city. Each outcome is a closure of sorts, but none of them erase the months or years of small violations that preceded the climaxes. The narrators still live with the echoes of being watched. They still wake at odd hours. They still look twice at a notification. But they also carry lessons: the value of documenting, the usefulness of telling someone, the power of leaving a place when it feels wrong, and the importance of insisting on verification before a meeting. Those lessons are pragmatic and stern, and rooted in the messy reality of what these 4 people lived through. If you've experienced anything like this, you are not alone. Share what you feel safe sharing in the comments. Your story may give someone the key detail they need to step back from a dangerous pattern. And if you are in immediate danger, contact your local emergency services. If you need to create a record, take screenshots and save them in a secure place, and consider reaching out to a local victim advocate who can help you navigate reporting. For anyone watching who wants to learn more, if you found these accounts useful and you want deeper explorations of verified true incidents and survivor resources, There's another video on your screen now that digs into online deception and how investigators piece together digital evidence.
If you've lived through something similar, consider sharing so others can recognize the pattern before it escalates. Remember the opening question: what if the person you matched with never existed? What if the face in a message was borrowed, and the danger that followed came not from a stranger's outright hatred, but from someone who learned how you lived and used that knowledge to get close? These stories are warning lights, small and then bright, and they remind us of something simple and hard. Trust your instincts, document what you can, and reach out for help. Because someone who steals a life online can only get so far without a human witness to say, "That's not right."